What wasn't easy was reaching 60 years old and then being required to learn a new language. So
you can legally buy and smoke cannabis in designated coffee shops.
the church was looking for an English-speaking pastor, a native English speaker. I remember about New Year's Eve was feeling like I was in a war zone because of the fireworks. Just a few years left of work life, and I would like to make these as interesting as possible.
What is the main role of a Presbyterian pastor?
Having lived in The Hague for 9 months, I realized I'm not as Dutch as I thought I was.
Welcome to another episode of Expat Experts. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dougla Brouwer, a Presbyterian pastor who has not only led congregations in the United States, but also in Switzerland and the Netherlands. Beyond his pastoral duties, Douglas has embarked on multiple mission trips, pilgrimages, and study tours around the globe. In this episode, we'll delve into his unique experience living abroad, the cultural nuances encountered, and the insights he gained from his travels. So sit back, relax, and let's explore this expat experience together. Doug, welcome. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. I'm really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I think we will have a very nice time in this episode. You have a very interesting background, and actually you are one of the, if not the first person who is deeply involved or had a religious life who I interviewed here in the podcast. So I'm really curious about that. So maybe we jump directly into it. I would like to know a little bit your background. Where did you grow up, and what led you to pursue a religious and travel path, both of them?
Yeah, I grew up in the United States, and I think I was born to some very adventurous parents. Every summer, my parents would take off on a 3-week road trip around North America. I mean, we visited every state in the United States and most of Canada, and so I had this adventurous spirit modeled for me by my parents. And I just continued in adulthood, and it's really gotten out of hand.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think it's a common pattern. I heard that a lot. Like, people who lived abroad normally come from families that used to travel, so that their parents are the ones who started this passion a little bit. What about the religious part? Because you are a Presbyterian pastor, which it's not a most common path to follow. No, you are not in the normal market of work, let's say like this.
Yeah, in terms of living abroad, I think I was coming up on my 60th birthday, and I thought, I've got just a few years left of work life, and I would like to make these as interesting as possible. I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And it was about that time that I heard about a church in Switzerland that was looking for a new pastor, and I applied, and and I ended up spending nearly 5 years there.
Nice. So the first time was Switzerland, and it was your first move with 60 years old, which is a big decision to take. It's not an easy one, I suppose. Also.
No, my daughters were grown, and so being empty nesters, it was easier to make that kind of a move. What wasn't easy was reaching 60 years old and then being required to learn a new language. So
I can imagine. And Swiss, which is even more complex normally for
right. Yeah, it's better to learn a language before you're 10 years old.
But it's never late for anything, no? So better late than never.
I'm shocked. I did eventually reach proficiency in standard German. I passed the test, but no, it was a struggle to get there.
Okay, yeah. I lived 4 years in Germany. Not easy either. It's not an easy language for anyone, I think. And it has no. I mean, I would say that it's closer to English than it is for us in Spanish or any Latin language. At least certain words, but the grammatic, it's way too complex. But yeah.
So when I was growing up, everyone was required to choose a language, and so I chose Latin for some reason, which has, I mean, it was fun and interesting, but it had no practical value.
Well, I don't know. Like for religious studies, I suppose it is important though. Like,
Yeah, maybe in the traditional Catholic church,
mm,
but no, not really for me.
okay. So one question that I had in my back of the mind, it was, what is the difference between being a pastor, or what is your job? Was your job in the United States very different from the job that you did in Switzerland, or was it similar in the sense of what you did a day to day?
So very, very similar in most ways, uh, but also quite different, mainly because of the mix of cultures. Um, the church was looking for an English-speaking pastor, a native English speaker. So I fit the bill, and what we shared in common in this church was that we were English speakers. But the church had more than 24 nationalities and language groups. So it was very, very diverse. And I think that was what presented the challenge. At meetings where decisions had to be made, we had to work extra hard to understand a cultural point of view. And I mean, I'm proud of myself that we were able to do it, but it was hard work.
Can imagine. I mean, it's also part of your work, I assume, no? Like understanding the problems and understanding the cultural backgrounds of these people. So you might be there as a support. Um, but for doing that, you need to be open and be very, or have a very broad culture of how people are.
I've been told, and this makes sense to me, that Presbyterians, people from my religious background, are actually good fits for these international churches because we tend to be open, accepting. Um, I mean, we certainly have our own way of doing things, but we all also tend to be open to other ways. Just a little matter of baptism, for example. I'm
Mm.
used to baptizing infants. I mean, that would be my tradition. Well, the the people I met in Switzerland had all different approaches to the sacrament of baptism, and I just found it fascinating. I went with it.
Sounds very interesting. I suppose it also enriches you the meeting other people and meeting other ways of doing. It's always a benefit.
You know, I think that military chaplains face the same issue. They may come from a specific tradition, but they are expected to serve people from all different religious backgrounds, and that's a little bit of the way I felt.
Nice. Did you said something interesting when you said that you arrived to 60 years old? You knew that there was a limited time of working, so it was clear for you that you would retire after, I don't know, 5 years, and then it was just like a temporary move to a country, or at some point you even like considered staying in Switzerland for the rest of your life, for example.
I don't think we ever considered that, mainly because we have children and grandchildren in the U.S. But I have returned twice after retiring. I served two more churches, once again in Switzerland, and then for 9 months in The Hague. So it's very difficult to get me to retire. I feel drawn back. And if the telephone rings during our conversation, I will probably say yes.
No problem. So you are always available for for your people, which is great. Um, what what is the moment then? Like you said, like you stayed 5 years in Switzerland. When is the
I
moment
did.
that you switched to going to Netherlands? What happened there?
Well, my wife and I moved back, and we settled in Michigan. We live in the state of Michigan,
Mhm.
and yeah, within a year, I received a call. Would you come and help us on a temporary basis? And so I moved back to Luzerne, Switzerland, just for a few months. And then, not much more time went by, and I had a similar opportunity to go to The Hague. And
Interesting.
since my grandparents are Dutch, were Dutch immigrants to this country, I was especially interested in living in the Netherlands. Can we talk further about that?
Yeah,
I learned
absolutely.
something very important. I've always thought of myself as Dutch. I have a Dutch last name, and just about everybody I know in this community is a descendant of Dutch grandparents. Well, having lived in The Hague for 9 months, I realized I'm not as Dutch as I thought I was. And it's not just that I don't speak the language. It's that I'm so far removed from the Dutch culture. And that became clear to me by living there.
It's interesting, and I think it's kind of a common pattern for like third generation kids who or people who grow up in another country. You absorb much more, even if your parents are fully, or even your grandparents are fully from a country. You absorb a lot of the environment where you grow up. No, so you end being more. I feel that after living 4 years in Germany and 3.5 years in Greece, I do things a little bit more like they would do it than I would do it in back at home in Barcelona. So, is it? Do you think there was anything that you absorbed from your time abroad? It's something that you took back home in the U.S. from Switzerland and Netherlands.
Oh, I took a great deal back. There was a great deal that I learned as a result. In fact, I wrote a book about my experience. That's not the one we're getting together to talk about, but um, I think the church in the United States, anyway, is not very diverse, not very multicultural. People tend to stay with their own ethnic and racial groups. But what I observed was the richness of life that was possible when people from diverse backgrounds come together.
Nice. What do you miss the most from Europe? from your time there?
I was just there this past weekend. I wouldn't recommend this a long weekend trip, but I was back in Zurich for the funeral or memorial service for a dear friend, and I was reminded in this very brief visit of how rich the cultural life is in Europe compared to the U.S. And I'm thinking of food, but also architecture and art and so on. I miss that so much.
Douglas moved to Europe at 60, proof that there is no right age to start a new adventure abroad. And with every plane, train, and tram that you catch, your luggage become part of your story. So, whether you are moving abroad for a new chapter or simply heading out for a long weekend in the Alps or the Aegean Sea, you need something that you can rely on. The luminous textured carry-on from Level 8 Luggages has become my go-to travel partner. It's durable, minimalist, and it's stylish. Ideal from when you want to travel light but still look amazing on the go. But that's not all. Level 8 offers everything from checking cases and backpacks to organized packing systems, and even a zipperless line, perfect for smooth security checks. Get a 10% off for your next travel companion with the code Level 8 Expat 10 using the link in the description of this episode. Again, that's Level 8 Expat 10 to have a 10% discount at Level 8 cases using the link in the description. You deserve luggage that makes traveling less of a burden. Travel well, travel safe, and let's continue with the episode. What about challenges? What surprising moments are like in the good way and in the bad way? Like what was the significant adjustments that you faced in both Switzerland and Netherlands when you arrived?
So I read something about Swiss culture before I went that would help me to understand what we were facing. And I forget the author now, but he likened Swiss culture to a coconut culture, whereas Americans are a peach culture. Mm-hmm. So Swiss have a hard exterior, but once you get to know them, they are very soft and easy to get to know and wonderful people. And the example would be that the man whose funeral service I went back for this past weekend, a dear friend. Americans, on the other hand, tend to be a peach culture, so we appear to be approachable. We appear to be easy to get to know. oh, just ready to engage in any conversation, but at the core, very difficult. There's a part of us that's impenetrable, according to this author. That was such a helpful insight for me in moving to Switzerland.
So it's a little bit like the getting to know people. It's a little bit more difficult. You felt like
Yes.
at least at the first level of contact, it's difficult to make friends, to give contact at the very beginning. No, I suppose.
At the beginning, yeah. But then once we established that friendship, oh my goodness, I view some of those relationships as lifelong relationships.
Makes sense. I think there is a couple of cultures in there, and Switzerland and Germany are closely related in that sense, I would say. What's the most rewarding part of working abroad as a pastor for you?
uh, you know, it's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. I enjoy being a pastor, period, no matter which culture I happen to be working in. But I think what was rewarding about it was that challenge of diversity. So when I came back, I felt compelled to write a book called How to Become a Multicultural Church. So it was that struggle to understand a variety of cultures that I appreciated in the end. I mean, that was what I didn't realize it at the time, but that was what I most needed to do.
Very interesting.
When you're with people who look like you and who speak like you do, I think you take for granted how easy it is to communicate. The smallest, facial expressions communicate a great deal. So I'm very comfortable in my own culture. But then to take me out of this culture and put me in a different setting requires a great deal of concentration. And I love that challenge.
Now, talking about challenges, also, like, how did you manage to learn? You said that you arrived nearly at the proficiency of German, which is not an easy language at all. How did you do it? Like, you invested a lot of hours into it?
I went to a language class in my village. I did not live in Zurich, where the church was, but I lived in a village, and as it turned out, there were other expats like me who needed to learn German for the work permit. So weekly language class, I read a daily German newspaper. I listened to something called Slow News, published by Deutsche Welle. So every day I listened to the news, but it was for people like me who were trying to learn the language. I spent a month one summer in Berlin at the Goethe Institute. And so that was a total immersion for a month with other students who were much younger than I was. And I can't resist telling you this. I had a wedding in Potsdam, so a suburb of Berlin. But that was the first time I'd ever spoke German in a public setting, and was expected to, communicate it well. And nobody complained, but I don't think anybody complimented me either.
That's a hard one to get, though, especially in Berlin, because most of the people doesn't. At least now in the center of Berlin, it's even difficult to hear German. So it's.
Yeah. I was surprised by how multicultural Berlin is. Yes, yeah.
I was just asking if you work also in English in the Netherlands.
I did, and I have a funny story about that. Again, they wanted a native English speaker to be their pastor, but I thought I would be proficient in Dutch because I grew up among Dutch people. So I can't resist telling you this story. I went to visit a woman in a rehab center. She was recovering from surgery, and I went to the front desk and I said, I would like to see Trudy Vandermeulen. And the person at the desk said, oh, I don't think we have a Trudy Vandermeulen. And she was looking through her papers and she said, oh, but we have a Trudy Vandermeulen. And I, I said, that's what I said. She said, no, 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 you didn't. But we do have a Trudy Vandermeulen. And she gave me directions to her room. And in that moment, I realized I, I was not Dutch. I'm an American who often pretends to be Dutch, and I enjoy visiting the Netherlands, but I am not Dutch.
You need to go to the root of a cultural thing to realize sometimes that you are not as proficient with the language, with their cultures, and not as involved as you think you are. No, sometimes, yeah. What is so? I lived in a couple of European countries right now, especially, and never lived in Switzerland or Netherlands, but I lived in Germany, which is close enough, and I noticed that the religion belief or the belief between people it's in a descent, let's say like this. Did you face challenges due to your work as a pastor in Europe, like due to the fact that people are not as religious as they used to be?
Yeah, I was certainly aware of that. The religious affiliation is very, very low in most Western European countries. So yeah, but there are some vibrant communities of faith here and there, and I happen to serve one. On Mondays, my day off, I would travel to surrounding villages to see their churches, and they usually started out as a Catholic cathedral, and then after the Reformation, they became Protestant, and today, within the last 50 years, they've become secular meeting spaces. And sometimes churches use them on Sundays, but typically they are event spaces that people rent. So that has been the religious trend in the Netherlands, from a Catholic majority to, in certain areas anyway, Protestant to nothing at all. And I'm just glad that these beautiful buildings are being preserved.
Curious. I mean, the buildings are important and the architecture is still there and it needs to be preserved and flourish. So it is curious though that the transition that humanity takes, no, and beliefs. Sometimes it's interesting to see which progress and doesn't mean that they are not believing in God. That's another question. Also, like it's separate.
The trend is certainly down in the West, though. But what is clear is that in Africa and in several Asian countries, there is a very strong religious presence. And so my churches in Switzerland and the Netherlands tended to have a heavy participation from African natives and Asian natives, which made life, as I say, very, very interesting and challenging.
Yeah, I think it's typical also. I mean, in Spain, a lot of churches rely a lot on South American immigration, for example, because in South America the religious part is still very, very, very strong compared to what it is in Spain. Of course, we have a lot of immigration due to the language, and it's true that you see a lot of people in churches who are immigrants. So that's also it's very interesting to see.
I have another little footnote to add to that story. We actually saw very few expats in our churches. So I had lunch one day with the headmaster of the American school in Zurich, and I said, "Can you explain to me what's going on?" And he said, "Doug, when expats spend 2 or 3 years in a country like this, they live for the weekend. And on the weekends, they are off sightseeing and skiing and certainly not going to church. Even though back in the U.S., they may very well have a church affiliation. They're not churchgoers while they're here."
Which at the end it makes sense, no? A little bit like they are there for a certain time and they want to take as much advantage as you can of like visiting everything, seeing everything, uh, which it's nice. Um, Before we jump to the next section, I would really like to ask you for a life hack and advice, a tip that you would give anyone who would like to move abroad, and maybe especially also in the pastoral or community focus role like you had. What would you say to someone who would like to follow a little bit the steps that you took?
I've already given you one, and that was doing some reading about the culture. And so reading about the coconuts and the peaches was very helpful going into Switzerland. And then the second bit of advice I would give is to work very hard at uh, establishing relationships, inviting people into your home for dinner. I I had some built-in relationships. There were people who knew me as their pastor, and so I had an advantage at that level. But I still think that we had to work hard to have people into our home so we could get to know them better. And that was true for our apartment building. Uh, Believe it or not, we had to make an extra effort to get to know these old Swiss Germans in our apartment.
I can imagine like that remembered me a little bit of Germany, like, and getting to know the neighbors. It's not always an easy task,
No,
or
no.
when you meet the neighbor, it's because of bad things, not because of good ones normally.
So one of the jokes in Switzerland is that there are 9 million police in Switzerland, and that's about the population of Switzerland. But they are very attentive to following the rules, especially about noise on Sunday. So our neighbors would let us know if we were not behaving on Sundays.
I Talking about that directly, then I would say we jump into the cultural deep dive. I do this in a little bit like a mini game section, let's say like this. I
Okay.
It's not really a game. It's just a little bit of like a back and forward to share knowledge about the culture and the countries you lived on. Hey there, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Remember that the best way to stay tuned with the latest episodes of the podcast is by clicking on subscribe in YouTube and in your favorite audio platform. For extra content and information, follow, like, and comment on our social media and visit our website, expatexpertspodcast.com. Thank you for supporting our podcast, and let's continue with the episode. And the first one that I would like to propose to you, it's guess the local custom. I'll describe a cultural practice or a tradition that they have, and if you know it, I would like you to tell me if it belongs to the Netherlands or it belongs to Switzerland. Every New Year's Eve, people jump into freezing cold water as a tradition.
That's not what I expected you to say about New Year's Eve. In the Netherlands, it's fireworks.
Really?
But that might be, I don't know. I don't know.
As far as I know, that's New Year Duik, which is in Netherlands, especially in the north region, I suppose. They literally jump into cold water as a welcome in the year, which is something that I cannot do even in summer. So brave from them, let's say like this.
What I remember about New Year's Eve was feeling like I was in a war zone because of the fireworks going on. No.
I have another one, which is like, it is common to have coffee time break with cake and pastries around 10:30 a.m. and around 3:30 p.m.
Again, that was not a part of my routine in either country, but I would like it. Where does that?
Switzerland for sure, and I think in Germany it's very traditional also to have this coffee and kuchen moment at specific times. I would not say it's so strict that it needs to be at 10:30 and 3:30, but definitely it comes as a break and a tradition.
The Germans and the Swiss typically do things on a rigid schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard that there are vending machines where you can buy hot croquettes and snacks in the streets. And in Netherlands, I don't know if you ever seen that.
There were food carts in The Hague. Yes, I do remember that. Uh, I think that these were, and they tended to be staffed by
Uh-huh.
immigrants. So the one that I went to at least once a week was owned and staffed by some Turkish immigrants. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Like more like a food truck approach of like
Yes.
eating
Yeah.
eating standing in the street. No, I think the next one you already touched it a little bit, but public silence is expected in trains, especially in certain sections.
In fact, there are silent cars.
It
Yeah,
is.
but I that might be true in both the Netherlands and Switzerland.
Probably it is. I've only experienced the Swiss part of that, especially that with the silent trains and everything. But probably in Netherlands there is also like an inspection in there.
I don't think you have to work very hard at that rule because everyone stares at their phones for the entirety of their trip.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. Let's do the last one of this one. People celebrate their birthdays by bringing their own cake to work.
Switzerland. That
See?
is an odd. No, what were you going to say? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I assume it can be one of these ones that can be in both also. But did you experience it in Switzerland?
In Switzerland, yes. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was an odd, to me, it was an odd tradition.
Especially, you need to bring your own thing for celebrating your birthday. Normally, you expect to receive things, no?
Right.
Nice. Then I will jump to the next one. I prepared a special uh, one related to church traditions around the world. But I researched a little bit of Christian traditions around the world that are not as as common as it could be, and I would like to hear if you heard about them ever, uh, and I would like to ask you if you know any special one at the end. I will just bring a couple. Um, One that I heard from Finland is that in Christmas Eve, uh, people go to cemeteries and light candles in order to honor the deceased ones and the loved ones.
I I am not familiar with that one, but uh, that tradition seems like a rich one, or it could be a rich one.
Mm. And the second one that I bring in, it's from home. So in Corpus Christi, in Catalonia, since 16th century, actually, we perform something that we call l'ou con balla, which is the dancing egg. And we actually we do a tradition where we put an empty eggshell on top of a jet of a fountain, and then it spins, so it makes it dance like that. It's Don't ask me where it comes from. I've seen it multiple times, but it's only in Corpus Christi, and we do it only for that.
And it has a religious meaning.
It
Yeah. Okay.
does. Theoretically, I don't really exactly know, but it's performed actually by pastors. Like, it's not that you do it on your own. It is a religious ceremony done by the pastors itself. Yes.
Okay. No, not familiar with that one.
So, Doc, I wanted to ask you if you know or if you've experienced any non so traditional Christian or religious ceremonies in your life.
No, this is not going to seem unusual to you, but I had never uh, participated in a baptism in a lake. Now, I know that in some traditions that's the only way it's done, but that was unfamiliar to me.
Hmm.
So there was a young woman from Africa who became a Christian while she was living in Switzerland, excuse me, and she wanted to be immersed. And I didn't know how to do that. I've officiated at dozens and dozens of baptisms over the years, so I had to watch YouTube videos. This is a confession, I guess, in order to find out how to do it. And we, one Sunday afternoon, waded out. I mean, there were a number of church members on the shore, but Nadia and I waded out into Lake Zurich, and since it was the summertime, it was not too cold, and I, I immersed her. I mean, I put her under the water and brought her back up. And that's the first and only time in my life that I ever did that. And I have to say, it was very, very meaningful to me. And obviously, I remember her name, and I can picture the moment in my mind right now. It was wonderful, but it was a novelty.
I imagine it must be an honor. This part of your work, I assume this is like, it's not only the connection with the people, but it's the memories that you generate for them. It's important moments on their life. So,
because she was from Africa, she had a different cultural reaction to what happened. She came out of the water yelling, making lots of noise. I can assure you that no Swiss would ever do that.
Because it's illegal, probably. So, jumping to the last cultural dive. And talking about legal or illegal, I would like to propose you a mini game called Local Laws Challenge, and I will bring you laws that exist in Switzerland and Netherlands. Doesn't mean that they are really applied, or they are applied in both. But and you tell me if you believe that they belong to Switzerland, they belong to the Netherlands, or they belong to both countries. I think the first one, you already touched it, but it is illegal to mow your lawn on Sundays.
Can't do that in Switzerland. And I assume that there's a religious origin to that. But today, Sunday is a family day, and it is sacred for that reason.
Yeah. I assume it is the whole Sunday approach. It seems very logical, no? Like, but
it is very difficult to find a store that's open. I discovered that if I needed a grocery item, I could find a store at the main train station in Zurich. But I mean, all other stores are closed.
The second one that I have here, it's about cannabis. So the fact that you can legally buy and smoke cannabis in designated coffee shops, I think it's a well-known one.
It has to be the Netherlands.
Exactly. But I don't know if it's really like that common, or it's really more like a tourist thing. Do the locals really do? I don't know.
I never saw that in The Hague, but I have seen it often in Amsterdam. So maybe it is for tourists.
There is a law that says that it's illegal to deny tap water in restaurants.
Isn't that all over Europe? Americans often ask for tap water, and the waiters don't like to give it. No, I don't know which country that is.
It's officially in the Netherlands. This is registered in the law system of Netherlands. For me, that was a surprise. Like in a lot of countries, like Greece, Germany, and Switzerland, even in Netherlands, you are asked if you want the tap water. In Greece, actually, they are literally ask you. It's not that you ask for it; they ask you if you want tap water or bottled one. In Spain, for example, you ask for tap water, and they tell you, no, you need to buy it.
Yes, yeah, sparkling or still, exactly. And then the assumption is that it's bottled. Yeah.
Actually, here in Italy, also normally it's bottled water. It's very strange to receive tap water. One more. You must have a license to own a TV or a radio.
Oh my goodness. Well, I owned a TV in Switzerland, but I don't think I had a license for it. I don't know. I don't know.
Actually, this is in both countries, and I will add Germany in that. And it's not directly the registration for the TV on itself as a electrodomestic or as a thing. It's that you need to pay a broadcasting fee for owning a TV or radio. I assume sometime this is inside of the cost of the house, for example, or the rent. But you pay for the public broadcasting services. It's like a kind of tax at the end.
I might have broken that law. I don't remember ever having paid a fee. We had to buy the TV in Switzerland, of course, because of our connection would not have, the electrical connection would not have worked. But I don't remember. No.
Okay, let's hope no Swiss police is listening to this, because they will send you the fee, and don't worry about that. They do that. Let's hope not.
I couldn't leave the country until my taxes were paid. I mean, I had to deregister, pay my taxes before I was allowed to depart. Yeah, they're very serious.
So probably you paid that inside of that bundle.
Okay.
So the last one, it's actually a funny one, and it's that it's illegal to walk in a pedestrian zone without shoes.
I have no idea.
It's part of local laws in majority of Swiss people, Swiss cities actually, and you can be fined by walking without shoes, which seems like one of these laws that hasn't been changed for some time. But
and yet, in the summertime, people would walk down to Lake Zurich. This was in our village, and undress at the edge of the water and go for a swim. Well, that would never have happened in the U.S. I think you could be arrested for that in the U.S. But
I think the culture of Switzerland and Germany of nudity in the lakes, it's curious. I mean, I suppose it might be a shock for you also. It was for me, and I'm European, so if you're right from another continent, it might be a little bit like why is people fully naked here?
Yeah. Yes, it was new to me.
So let's go to the next part of the episode. I reached to our listeners in the podcast, and I grabbed some questions from the audience. So I would love you to respond to them. I have a question from Manulian. He's asking, what is the main role of a Presbyterian pastor?
Generally speaking, pastors usually, not in every case, because pastors can also work in hospitals, and they can be chaplains in the military and so on. But typically, a Presbyterian pastor is assigned to a church, and that person leads Sunday services, calls on the sick and the elderly, and I mean that, and then a million other items on the job description. But typically, it's to be a leader for a congregation.
Nice. A related one that I have from Karen 77. It's what is the main difference between a Presbyterian church and a Catholic Roman Apostolic, let's say like this.
Right, in the time of the Reformation, the reformers split off from the Catholic Church, and I'm a product of the Protestant Reformation. And I was raised in a Calvinist environment, actually a Dutch Reformed environment. But the Presbyterians are also part of that Protestant Reformation, and they trace their heritage to Scotland. Now, the Scottish dimension of American Presbyterianism has gone away, but we are very much a part of the historic Protestant Reformation. And the good news is, I think some of those distinctions are becoming less and less important over the years.
Sure. I mean, belief it's belief, no? So at the end, it's talking about belief. I have one from Anna Puch 6. She's asking if living abroad changed your perspective about God or religion at all.
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think I've answered that in a couple of different ways already for you. I think I tend to be an accepting person. I enjoy hearing an alternative point of view, and living abroad certainly challenged the narrowness of my own experience. So meeting Christian people from all over the world opened my eyes to a variety of different beliefs. So yes, now other pastors may respond differently to that, but for me, it was an enriching experience. I'm grateful for what I'd learned.
Nice. So, Doc, before we wrap a little bit up the episode, let's say like this, I would love to give you the space and seeing how this conversation is going. I know that you have a lot of things to say and insights. So, I know that you write. I know that you have published books. So, what are you working on? What projects can you share with the audience?
I have recently completed a book which is about ready to be released, and I think by the time this is broadcast, it will have been released. The book is called The Traveler's Path, and it's a reflection on my lifetime of setting out, going places, meeting people, and I think that travel can be, it isn't always, but travel can be a transformative experience. And it can have a rich spiritual component too. And that's what the book is about. Thank you for giving me a chance to plug that.
No, absolutely. It's part of that. It's a matter of creating a little bit of community and caring about what others. So definitely, if the book is out, which I assume it will be, or at the point of time that this goes live, where can the listeners find you as a person and the books?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, those are U.S. publishers, of course, but there are Amazon distributors in Europe, Amazon of Germany, France, and Italy. They will all carry the book.
Nice. And more personally, is there any point where people can follow your work or be there seeing what you do?
I have been a blogger for 12 years, and within the last 2 years, I've moved over to Substack. So I am a Substacker, and the brilliant name for my newsletter is Doug's Substack. And I would love to see your listeners. I would love it if your listeners found me there.
Absolutely. All the links, hopefully, to the book in Amazon and whatever platforms that are available, and also the Substack, as always, will be in the description of the episode. So go and check it out. Before we finalize the episode, I would like to wrap up things a little bit with any funny or unexpected story from your time living abroad, if you have any.
So I took a summer sabbatical in Italy, and my daughters, who were teenagers at the time, were along with us. And one day we toured Pompeii and Herculaneum to see the excavations there. And while we were touring, we learned that a lot of the artifacts had been removed to a museum in Naples. So we thought, okay, that seems like a interesting thing to do. And we went to Naples to I think it's the National Museum there. And there was a special room at the museum where we had to sign our daughters in. In other words, we had to give permission for our daughters to enter this special room at the museum in Naples. Well, very quickly upon entering this special room, we realized that this exhibit was the pornography of Pompeii. And apparently there was a lot of pornography in Pompeii. So my daughters learned a great deal that day. from our visit, and I have to say that I learned I learned some things too. We never expected to have that be part of our experience, but there we were looking at what was taken out of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Was that what you were? That was not what you were expecting.
Absolutely,
was it?
that's one of a funny one actually. Like I wasn't expecting that one, so thanks a lot.
My daughters still talk about it, and I think they're still embarrassed that they did that with their parents.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? It's not the thing that you want to do as a teenager with your parents, definitely.
No.
Lovely. Thank you a lot for sharing your time with me, Doug, today. Like I really, really appreciated your experience and you sharing with us your journey and wisdom. Thanks again.
And thank you, Mark. This has been a fun experience for me. You're very well organized, and I've appreciated this experience.
Thanks a lot. So again, to all of our listeners, don't forget to subscribe, to share this episode. Go and check Doug's writings and books and Substack for more inspiring content. Until then, keep exploring, stay curious, and until the next time in Expat Experts.